She said, "I'm better off without you," and slammed the door. A stainless steel pan rattled from the force. Her shadow through the frosted glass wavered like heat rising off a car hood. I didn't say a word. I stood there long enough for the motion sensor porch light to flick off, leaving me alone in the dark. My fingers were clenched around the strap of my old duffel bag, the same one I used to carry tools in when I fixed the kitchen she now cooked in with someone else. I walked away without looking back. Not toward the house. Not toward the room upstairs that still had my name etched into the drawer lining. Not toward the garage where my handprint stained the wood from building her that goddamn bookshelf she never once thanked me for. I just walked. And while I walked, I smiled. Because I wasn't leaving broken. I was leaving prepared. What she didn't know, what she never thought to check in her fit of righteous, wine-fueled independence, was that the backup drive was still plugged into the old router she never let me replace. She said it was good enough. I agreed. It was good enough for me to quietly mirror every email, every shared folder, every password reset request she made in the last 8 months. 8 months ago, I stopped being her husband in my heart. She just hadn't caught up to that truth yet. You see, when you live with someone long enough, you stop noticing the small changes until they pile up like receipts at the bottom of a glove compartment. At first, it was the way she stopped texting me during the day. Then it was the meals she stopped cooking, the perfume she only wore when she went to yoga. Yoga turned into late strategy meetings. Strategy meetings turned into a man named Griffin. Griffin turned into red wine teeth and missing panties in the laundry bin. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was when she looked me dead in the eye one morning, still wiping foundation from the corners of her mouth, and said, "You're dragging me down." That's when I knew I was done building someone else's throne. Here's where things get funny. There's a paperweight in her home office shaped like a small, silver rabbit. I gave it to her on our 2nd anniversary. Not because she liked rabbits, but because she once told me, drunkenly, under a blanket, that she'd always wanted to raise one as a kid, but her mom said they were pointless animals. That rabbit sat on every desk she ever worked at. She took it to job interviews. She bragged about it on Zoom calls. She never realized the base unscrewed. Inside, I'd stashed a micro SD card. Not for romantic reasons. For insurance. On that card were photos I found in a hidden iCloud folder when I helped her update her phone. She had no idea those synced to the laptop. She had no idea I'd seen the selfies of her in the backseat of Griffin's Tesla, not wearing the yoga leggings she claimed were in the wash. She had no idea I'd watched a 37-second muted video where she laughed and said, "He still thinks I'm at Pilates." No, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I copied the file to 3 locations, printed it once, mailed it to a P.O. box I opened in another town, and put the SD card back in the rabbit where it belonged. Her little trophy of deceit. That was 6 weeks ago. I've been planning since. She thinks I left with nothing. That's her first mistake. She doesn't know I opened a credit card in my name the same day she drained the joint account. Doesn't know I transferred ownership of the Tahoe to her name right before the second missed payment. I kept the Civic, old, dented, but reliable, and more importantly, clean. She doesn't know I canceled the utilities a day before walking out. The email confirmation went to a separate address she'd never seen. She won't see it until the power cuts off next Tuesday. She doesn't know I already closed the storage unit her mother's antique furniture was sitting in, or that I used the emergency key she hid behind the fridge magnet to get in and photograph every single one of her "do not touch" heirlooms before selling them on consignment under her cousin's maiden name. Oh, and Griffin? I know where he works. I know his wife's name. I know what their kids look like because his iPad syncs to a shared cloud account that also held, very briefly, their family calendar. I didn't touch anything. I just looked. That was enough. There's one more thing she doesn't know. I made a copy of our marriage license, and I found something she never expected anyone to notice. Her legal name was misspelled by 1 letter. 1 letter. Which means the mortgage, the will, the joint savings account, all technically invalid under her legal identity. But I'll let her figure that out the same way I did. Alone. In the dark. When the lights go out next Tuesday. And the door she slammed finally stays shut for her. Because I'm not coming back. But what's coming for her? That's just getting started. Griffin wore loafers without socks and drove a Tesla with a license plate that read growth. That should have been my first clue the man was a parasite in linen. The second clue? He didn't know how to shake hands. He did that limp wrist, half-grip thing like he was touching something unpleasant. When I met him, officially, at the company Christmas party, he introduced himself as an ideas guy. I smiled, told him I was a consequences guy. He laughed like he thought I was joking. Griffin's wife, Amanda, didn't laugh. She stared at me like she was trying to remember where she knew my face from. She didn't figure it out that night, but she would. Oh, she would. That party was 3 months before she slammed the door in my face. Before the groceries stopped being shared, before the sex dried up like spilled wine on a hot patio. But the seeds? They were already in the ground, rotting. Back then, I still believed in fixing things. I believed in therapy, in date nights, in talking things through like adults. I didn't realize I was negotiating with someone who'd already mentally packed her bags. I was trying to patch drywall in a house she'd already set on fire. But I kept receipts. That night at the party, Griffin put his hand on her lower back. Not briefly, not politely. It was the kind of touch that says, "I've seen you naked." Subtle, possessive. She flinched, but not from discomfort. From guilt. That half-second twitch was all I needed. My brain stored it like a hunter clocking footprints. After that, I started noticing the small things. A parking receipt in her coat pocket from a bar near Griffin's office. A second toothbrush in her gym bag. She claimed it was for freshening up after hot yoga. I asked her when she last went. She said Tuesday. I checked the yoga studio's app. The studio had been closed for renovations all week. Still, I didn't confront her. I fed her stories instead. I invented a coworker named Haley and casually mentioned her during dinner. Watched as her eyes narrowed just slightly, like a predator sniffing competition. I even left a red hair tie in my truck, on purpose. When she found it, she said nothing. Just raised an eyebrow. That told me everything. She wasn't upset because she wasn't worried about losing me anymore. That's when I knew I had freedom. And once you know you're not being watched anymore, you can move in ways that make ghosts jealous. So I began testing her. I changed the Wi-Fi password and waited to see if she'd ask. She didn't. I stopped wearing cologne. She didn't notice. I stopped saying love you before bed. Nothing. Then came the turning point, her laptop. One evening, she left it open on the dining table while she went to walk the dog. We don't have a dog. We have a cat. She just needed to take a call where I couldn't hear. I took a risk. I mirrored the screen to my phone using a remote desktop app I'd installed during one of her software updates. She thought it was antivirus. What I saw in those 20 minutes made my blood go cold. She and Griffin weren't just sleeping together. They were planning a move to a new city. She'd already applied for jobs out west, jobs I hadn't heard her mention once. She was applying under her maiden name. They joked about how free she'd feel once she was no longer tied to that fixer-upper and his sad eyes. She sent him a photo. Not nude. Worse. It was of our bedroom closet. My side, empty hangers. A draft plan. She was preparing to ghost me in real time. She didn't know I was watching. That night, I slept beside her like nothing had changed. I even rubbed her back when she said she had a stress headache. She curled up into me like a cat returning to a burning house just for the warmth. Meanwhile, I was already organizing the dominoes. The next morning, I took the day off work. Told her I had a dentist appointment. I used the time to visit Amanda. Yes, Griffin's Amanda. I found her office through a LinkedIn rabbit hole. Brought her a box of scones from a bakery 3 blocks down. Told the receptionist I was her cousin. When Amanda came to the lobby, I handed her the box and said 4 words. I think he's lying. She stared at me like I was radioactive. Then she led me to the back stairwell and said, "Start talking." So I did. I told her about the yoga lie, the toothbrush, the screenshot of my mirrored screen showing her husband's grinning face on a split-screen Zoom with my wife. Amanda didn't cry. She smiled. "You're not the first one," she said, voice like a blade sliding back into a sheath. Turns out Griffin had a habit. Amanda? She had a prenup and a folder labeled exit strategy. We traded business cards. Hers had embossed lettering. Mine had none. But we both left the stairwell knowing this wasn't revenge yet. This was reconnaissance. And reconnaissance? That's how you turn betrayal into leverage. But I still had one more card to play, something my wife wouldn't see coming in 1,000 years. It started with a dead cat and a man named Clark. Clark wasn't a friend. He wasn't family. He wasn't anyone my wife would have ever remembered. which made him perfect. Back when I was still fixing HVAC units on the side for extra cash, I'd helped a retired vet named Mr. Kellerman redo his ductwork. The guy could barely walk, but his brain? Sharp as ever. Used to run a security company before he got screwed out of his pension by, you guessed it, his own son-in-law. Kellerman liked me because I listened. I liked him because he didn't talk like everyone else. Straight shooter, no filters, no pity. When he died, he left me a list of 5 names. Said they were favors owed. Clark was one of them. Clark ran a company with no signage and no website. You walked into his office, and it looked like a thrift store had exploded. Old radio equipment, discarded ID badges, cameras the size of lighters, plus a coffee machine that looked like it ran on diesel. But the man knew everything about digital footprints. I'm not a PI, he said, first thing. I don't tell people. I don't sneak around. I collect behavior. I told him I needed to know how deep the rabbit hole went. He raised an eyebrow. I assume this is about a woman. I slid him a photo of Griffin and my wife at a corporate retreat. They were holding champagne flutes. Hers was raised. His hand was just a little too low on her hip. Clark studied the image like it was a crime scene. I'll need access to any smart home devices. Ring cams, Alexas, Nest, anything she doesn't realize talks back. I've got her old Fitbit login. Clark looked at me for the first time with genuine admiration. Son, we might just ruin 2 lives and get paid doing it. 2 days later, he handed me a burner phone. This number only. No names. If she uses Uber, I'll know. If she uses a Keurig, I'll know. She won't feel watched, but she'll start wondering why doors open for her before she knocks. And they did. Example, she tried to file a change of address form online for a new apartment. The site froze. Reloaded. Said, error, name mismatch. Because Clark had already fed a conflict into the back-end API. Small. Harmless. Just enough to frustrate her. Another, Griffin sent her a hotel confirmation from his business email. 30 minutes later, she gets a text from her own mother, without context, saying, I thought you said you were going to Emily's baby shower this weekend? Clark hadn't hacked anything. He just created a new folder in her Gmail called Receipts, then auto-forwarded her hotel bookings there. Her mom, who shared a Netflix profile under the same email, noticed the folder by accident. Layer by layer, we made the walls close in. Meanwhile, Amanda was doing her part. She filed for a marital separation based on suspected infidelity, which triggered a temporary asset freeze. Griffin, thinking he'd move in with my wife, now couldn't rent a shoebox without Amanda's signature. Their love nest? Delayed indefinitely. But I wasn't done. Remember the dead cat? His name was Marmalade. Belonged to a neighbor who used to sneak him treats from our porch. Marmalade wandered too far one night and got hit by a garbage truck. My wife cried for days. She kept a small ceramic urn with his ashes on her bookshelf, next to the rabbit paperweight. I stole it back, emptied it, cleaned it, filled it with something else, flash drives. Clark helped me load them with non-lethal digital poison. A few audio files. A few screenshots. One video of Griffin pulling my wife onto his lap in a conference room, not sexual, but intimate enough to sink a battleship in court. I resealed the urn, glued it shut with epoxy, slid it into the moving box labeled sentimental, do not touch. Then I waited. 3 days later, my wife called me. I let it ring 6 times. Picked up on the 7th. You took Marmalade. No, hi. No apology. No concern. Just accusation. I said, calmly, I left everything that mattered. She paused. Where are you? I don't live in hypotheticals anymore. She hung up. That was the first crack. The second came that Sunday, when Griffin showed up at her door drunk, holding his phone and slurring that his whole life was getting audited. She didn't let him in. Not because she was done with him, but because she didn't want the neighbors to see. That's the difference between guilt and regret. I was watching it all unfold from a lawn chair in another town, sipping black coffee and flipping through a binder titled Asset Reallocation Strategy. Page 3 had a list of all shared purchases made during the marriage. Guess what wasn't in her name? The engagement ring. It was in mine. And she was about to find out that diamonds, just like people, can be repossessed. But first, she'd have to sit through one very uncomfortable dinner. Because guess who just RSVP'd to her sister's engagement party? Me. And Amanda. The engagement party was at some overpriced fusion place downtown that tried way too hard to be rustic. Edison bulbs hanging from reclaimed barnwood. Mason jars with $14 cocktails. Everyone there looked like they paid someone else to hang their Christmas lights. And in the middle of all of it, my wife stood next to her sister, grinning with the kind of over-rehearsed excitement you only see in hostage videos. She didn't expect me to show. She really didn't expect Amanda to be on my arm. We walked in 10 minutes late. On purpose. Right in the middle of the maid of honor's speech. I wore the same navy suit I got married in, tailored a little sharper, clean shave, no tie. Amanda wore a black cocktail dress that whispered wealth and revenge in the same breath. Heads turned. Conversation stalled. My wife blinked like she'd seen a ghost drag a runway model out of a dream and into her reality. She pulled her sister aside within seconds. I could only imagine the conversation. Why is he here? You invited him. And who the hell is she? That's Amanda. Who's Amanda? Griffin's wife. Boom. Like tossing a live grenade into a salad bar. We didn't cause a scene. We didn't have to. Amanda and I stayed long enough to smile politely, clink glasses, and drop a single envelope into the gift box. No return name. Just a card inside that said, "For the next man you lie to. May you see it sooner." Inside the envelope? A still photo of Griffin and her in bed, timestamped from 2 months ago, overlapping the sisters' wine retreat weekend she swore she spent detoxing. I don't know what reaction she had, because we were already gone. Back in the car, Amanda laughed so hard she had to redo her lipstick. She's going to rip his car apart with a steak knife tonight, she said. You realize that, right? Better the car than the prenup, I said. She grinned. I like you more than I should. Same. But this isn't a movie. She turned, serious. No, this is a hostile merger. What neither of them knew was that I'd already contacted Griffin's employer. See, when you work in corporate compliance long enough, you learn how thin the glass is between privacy and policy. Griffin had violated company code by using work devices for personal relationships with subordinates. My wife didn't technically work there, but she'd been contracted through a marketing firm for 2 campaigns. Enough overlap to qualify as a violation. HR was investigating. Quietly. Thoroughly. Griffin wouldn't be fired. Not immediately. But his next promotion? Gone. His mentor? Pulled into the loop. His reputation? Preloaded with termites. Meanwhile, my wife tried to regain control. That same week, she sent me a text. Can we talk like adults? I replied, sure. Pick a date between never and court. She didn't respond. But her lawyer did. The email was passive-aggressive perfection. My client wishes to pursue an amicable dissolution of the marriage, preserving dignity and mutual respect. Please advise on how you would like to proceed with asset division. I forwarded it to Clark, who replied. Translation: She's finally looked under the rug and realized it's full of broken teeth. He was right. She had no clue the bank account I'd drained was only the decoy, or that the crypto wallet I'd been quietly feeding for years was sitting fat and clean under an alias she couldn't legally touch. Oh, and the car? I traded the Civic for a black '68 Mustang 6 towns over. Title clean. Registered to a Shell LLC that also, technically, owned the rights to a short story I'd published years ago. Why does that matter? Because that story was plagiarized in a self-help book that hit Amazon's top 500. Yes, who's now filing a quiet copyright claim through a third-party legal rep? Me. Yes, who edited that book? My wife. You see, in her desperation to freelance and feel independent, she forgot that the fine print matters. And when she used portions of my old writing without attribution, because she assumed I'd forgotten, I didn't say a word. I saved the manuscript, dated it, and waited. That lawsuit won't land for a few more weeks. But when it does, it'll arrive the same week as her credit card statements suddenly show a $4,200 charge from a wellness retreat in Colorado she never attended. She paid for Griffin's birthday weekend with her old joint card, and I made sure the chargeback dispute listed unauthorized use during separation proceedings. Clark helped file the notice. Amanda sent flowers. My wife? She started leaving voicemails. First polite, then pleading, then furious. The last one? She screamed, I swear to God, you think you've won, but you don't know what I have on you. I saved that voicemail. Labeled it, Chapter 4, Desperation. Because she was right. I don't know what she has on me, but she doesn't know what I left inside the rabbit. And the person holding the key now? He just texted me 5 words. It's time. We're ready. Clark wasn't the only ghost I called. The next storm was coming from inside her bloodline. Her mother always hated me. Not in the loud, drunk at Thanksgiving kind of way. No, Lucille was far more surgical than that. She hated me with compliments. Backhanded ones. You're so stable. He must be such a comfort, she'd tell my wife. Eyes never quite meeting mine. Or, he's got that quiet strength, doesn't he? Translation, boring, predictable, unthreatening. Lucille was the kind of woman who wore pearls to the DMV and ironed her dish towels. She once called the HOA because a neighbor's American flag was the wrong red. She believed appearances were everything. So naturally, when my wife married me, a contractor with dirt under his nails and a beat-up Ford, she smiled for the pictures and then spent the next decade trying to chip away at me like I was a stain on her daughter's resume. She never expected I'd be the one to hold the detonator to her entire social persona. See, Lucille has secrets. Old ones. And one of them is named Henry. Henry isn't my wife's father. Not biologically, anyway. Lucille got pregnant at 19 during what she insists was a brief spiritual lapse. The man disappeared, conveniently, and 9 months later she married Harold. The man she tells everyone is my wife's father. The family doesn't know. My wife didn't know. Hell, I didn't even know, not until I met Henry 6 years ago when I rewired a rental unit downtown. He recognized me, said I had Lucille's eyes. I laughed, until he pulled out an old photo. There she was, 17, smiling in a field, wrapped in Henry's jacket. He told me everything over 2 beers and a pulled pork sandwich. Said he didn't want anything, just closure. Said he used to write Lucille letters, but they all came back marked, return to sender. And he showed me one, dated June 1986. Still folded, yellowed, but unmistakable. I never told my wife. At the time, it didn't feel relevant. Just more of Lucille's hypocrisy to swallow and ignore. But now it was leverage. And I used it. Clark scanned the letter, confirmed the handwriting, and traced Henry through tax records just long enough to find the detail I needed. Lucille had been sending him hush money for years, under a fake consulting agreement through a shell company registered in Nevada. Guess what that company name was? Eliza Creek Holdings, named after the creek behind Lucille's childhood home. She wasn't even clever about it. I pulled every bank transfer from the account connected to her, emailed it to a disposable address, waited. Within 24 hours, Lucille called my wife in a panic. I know because I intercepted the call. Clark installed a routing filter during a firmware upgrade I did on her router 6 months back. Completely legal. Completely invisible. Lucille's voice was frantic, brittle. You have no idea what he's capable of, darling. He's not who you think he is. And my wife? She snapped back. You mean like you? Boom. Riff confirmed. That call was my green light. I mailed Lucille a printed, bound booklet, letterhead and all, titled Legacy Management, a confidential review of Eliza Creek Holdings and potential fraudulent transfers. No sender, just a return address for an estate law firm in Connecticut. The next day, she withdrew $12,000 from her checking account. The day after that, she called my attorney. Not hers. Mine. Said she wanted to mediate. Lucille. Mediate. That told me she was bleeding, and bleeding fast. I didn't show. I sent Amanda instead. Amanda, whose own mother was ruined by a bad prenup and a good bottle of gin. Amanda returned with a voice memo. Lucille offered me $20,000 to make you drop whatever you're doing. I told Amanda to decline politely, but firmly. And I instructed her to leave behind a USB drive with a single file. A short clip of Griffin, clearly high, clearly panicked, whispering. She told me she had something on her mom. I don't even know what the hell that means. That clip wasn't real. Clark had stitched it together from security audio and a bit of AI voice smoothing. But the paranoia it would cause? Realer than bone. By now, my wife was spiraling. Her bank account was suddenly flagged for review. Her Instagram was bombarded with polite DMs from burner accounts asking about Colorado and retreat invoices. One even sent her a still from the bed photo, asking, "Did you know he was married?" She shut down her social media that night. Blocked me. Blocked Amanda. Then she made a mistake. She reached out to Griffin. Not via text. Not by call. She showed up. At his house. Amanda was already there. How do I know? Because Clark intercepted the ring cam footage. Timestamped. Labeled. My wife standing outside the front door with a tote bag and tears in her voice, pleading, "Can we just talk? Please?" I lost everything. Amanda opened the door. Silent. Griffin didn't even come out. My wife just stood there, waiting. Long enough for the neighbors to notice. Long enough for Amanda to take out her phone, snap a photo, and say, "You should go." And she did. Back to Lucille's house, where the final piece was waiting. On the dining table, propped up between two candlesticks, was the rabbit. The silver paperweight. Clean. Empty. And next to it, a note. My handwriting. Just 4 words. Ask her about Henry. The next part wasn't mine to watch. But I heard what came next. Because Clark caught the aftermath on the neighbor's outdoor mic. The first thing my wife screamed was, "You lied to me my whole life." And Lucille? Lucille didn't say a damn word. Because some legacies aren't built. They're inherited. And hers just crumbled. But the real bomb? Hadn't even dropped yet. That was coming from the courthouse. From me. The letter was printed on thick, creamy paper, the kind lawyers use when they want you to feel the consequences. It arrived by certified mail, signature required. I timed it for a Monday, mid-morning, right when Lucille and my wife would be at their most fragile. The envelope bore the name of a boutique law firm specializing in domestic restructuring and spousal asset enforcement. Inside, a formal demand for voluntary mediation in light of newly discovered discrepancies in the marital financial disclosures. Translation? I was about to blow up their version of the truth. When my wife signed those financial affidavits during the early divorce proceedings, she omitted a few things. Like the offshore account her mother set up for her in her 20s, just in case. Or the fact that she technically held partial ownership in a silent partner LLC tied to Griffin's company. You can hide those things from an angry husband. You can't hide them from Clark. He found the LLC buried under a real estate trust registered to an address in Wyoming, non-disclosure state. What she didn't know was that one of the signatories on the filing used a burner email that once synced to her iPad. Guess who was on the iCloud backup? Yep. Screenshots. Documents. A PDF with her initials. I didn't threaten her with it. I invited her to clarify the oversight. I knew she wouldn't. She'd panic. She'd call Lucille. Lucille would tell her to ignore it. Lawyers bluff. They posture. But this wasn't a bluff. By Friday, my lawyer had filed a formal motion to reopen discovery. Included in the appendix, a photo of Griffin and her in Cabo, timestamped for the same week she claimed to be visiting her cousin in hospice care. The image showed her toasting a coconut drink on a rooftop bar. The kicker? The location metadata was still embedded in the JPEG. All perfectly legal. All admissible. I didn't care about the money. Not really. I cared about something else. Public record. I wanted every lie she'd told, financial, emotional, marital, etched into the court's memory like a tattoo. But the real storm was about to hit from a direction she never saw coming. Her job. She worked for a mid-tier brand consultancy. Nothing flashy, but they handled sensitive client launches, IPO brand support, crisis comms. You know what doesn't play well in crisis comms? Infidelity. Financial fraud. Civil litigation. Especially when your LinkedIn bio says, integrity is everything. Clark had set a crawler weeks prior that mirrored her professional profiles. Once the courthouse filing went public, we injected it, subtly, into the metadata. No big flashing red sign. Just a few quietly re-indexed search results. One medium traffic blog post she once ghostwrote now featured comments asking, "Is this the same Emily R. in that divorce docket in Hennepin County?" Someone at her office saw it. Then someone in HR. 3 days later, she was placed on leave to deal with personal matters. That's corporate speak for clean out your desk before we change the locks. And Griffin? Oh, Griffin was imploding. Amanda filed her suit, aggressive, thorough, and public. Included in the claim, an affidavit describing coerced business entanglements with my wife. Griffin's board took notice. Within a week, he was on sabbatical. They say sabbatical, but I knew the truth. He was circling the drain in a Westin hotel suite, refreshing his email every 5 minutes, wondering how it all went sideways. And while my wife's world contracted like a dying star, I made one last move. I scheduled a deposition. In person. My lawyer said it wasn't necessary, that we had enough. I insisted. She showed up late. Hair tied back. No makeup. Cheekbones sharp from stress. She looked like someone who hadn't eaten in days. She wouldn't look at me. The stenographer swore her in. We got through the basics. Then I passed my lawyer a slip of paper. He slid it across the table. I'd like to introduce Exhibit 47. She looked down. Paused. Her breath caught. It was a copy of a handwritten note. Her note. From 5 years ago. Found it in an old planner she left behind. It read, "If I ever turn into my mother, please leave. And don't come back. Burn the bridge. Salt the earth." She'd written it to herself. At the time, I remember she cried after writing it. Said she was scared she'd turn bitter. Vain. Controlling. And now, here she was, sitting across from the man who did exactly what she asked. I left. I didn't come back. I burned everything. And the earth? Let's just say nothing was growing on her side of the fence anymore. Her hands trembled. She whispered, "You planned this." I leaned forward. Calm. Cold. "No. You planned this. I just finished what you started. We broke early that day." She couldn't continue. Outside, my attorney asked, "That was personal. Was that necessary?" I said, "No. It was just honest." But I wasn't done. Because there was still one person left who needed to hear the truth. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who'd never liked her. My brother. The detective. And he had his own unfinished business with her. My brother and I hadn't spoken much since Dad's funeral. Not out of anger. Just drift. He buried himself in police work. I buried myself in fixing other people's kitchens and pretending my marriage wasn't rotting from the inside out. We used to be close, 2 years apart, always covering for each other. He was the golden son, though. Straight-laced, uniform pressed, badge polished. Meanwhile, I was the one everyone forgot until something broke. But when he saw her name on the docket I emailed him, he called me within minutes. I knew she was trouble the second she smiled at Mom's wake, he said. I didn't have to remind him what she did that day. She wore white. White. To my mother's funeral. Claimed it was a symbol of rebirth. My mother despised her. Said she was a pretty vase with no water in it. But I married her anyway, because I was young, in love, and stupid enough to think loyalty could outlast poison. I'll do what I can, he said. But you need to be prepared. If we dig, really dig, we might find things you didn't expect. I laughed. Brother, I'm counting on it. 3 weeks later, I met him at a diner outside city limits. He slid a manila envelope across the table without a word. Inside was a photo. My wife. In a car. Kissing someone who wasn't Griffin. Who the hell is that? Name's Martin P. Ellis. 42. Divorced twice. Former client at her agency. Lives in Denver. You want the kicker? He pulled out another photo. Martin. Standing with Griffin. Same golf event. Same polo shirt. So, she was screwing both of them? No. All 3 of them, he said. Martin was her bridge out in case Griffin imploded. But she didn't know Martin's ex-wife hired a PI last year who's been watching him ever since. We traded files. The dots connected so fast I nearly choked on my coffee. My wife had been hedging her escape plan with multiple lifeboats. Griffin was the flashy one. Martin was the financial fallback. Me? I was the training dummy she practiced betrayal on. But here's what she didn't know. Martin had a sealed lawsuit against him for coercion, allegedly leveraging professional favors for sexual relationships with consultants. And now her face was in his passenger seat. Smiling. Is it enough? I asked. My brother nodded. It's enough to get her blackballed in 3 industries. And probably banned from managing anything that isn't a Pinterest board. I filed a private complaint through a professional ethics board. Clark anonymized it, of course. But it included enough linked data, timestamped photos, and emails to trigger a formal review of her firm's hiring practices. The next Monday, her name was scrubbed from the company website. By Wednesday, her LinkedIn bio said, currently exploring new opportunities. By Friday, someone on Twitter posted a screen grab of her Cabo photo with the caption, "This you?" The replies were brutal. But the final domino didn't fall until Saturday. That's when Amanda called me, laughing. You're not going to believe who just got subpoenaed. I didn't have to guess. Lucille. Turns out the rabbit, my little silver insurance policy, contained one more gem, an audio file. Not from my wife. From Lucille. Recorded 6 years ago at our Christmas dinner. I'd hidden a backup mic after Lucille tried to talk my wife into freezing my credit line, just in case things go south. She'd laughed, called me predictable, said I'd never be smart enough to catch on. She was half right. I wasn't smart back then, but I never forgot. That recording? Clark filtered the noise, cleaned the audio, and matched the voice print. Then we uploaded it to a secure server. Sent an anonymous tip to the IRS. Why? Because Lucille had also mentioned, casually, over wine, that she sometimes shifted inheritance funds creatively to avoid tax caps. Bragged about putting things under Harold's name posthumously. Yeah, her dead husband. The audit letter hit her mailbox Tuesday. And while all of this unfolded, I took a day off. I drove 2 hours to a lake where I used to fish with my dad. I brought nothing but a lawn chair, a beer, and the original ring box from our wedding. Inside wasn't the ring. Inside was a folded sticky note. My handwriting. It said, "You stayed too long. Never again." I set the box on the water. Watched it drift. Let it sink. Then I checked my phone. New voicemail. Unknown number. My wife's voice. Hello. Scratched raw. Please. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Just talk to me. Just once. Delete. No response. Because I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her consequence. And she hadn't even met the worst one yet. That was coming from someone else. Someone I hadn't told her about in years. Someone with her last name. Her name was Nora, my wife's half-sister. Same mother, different father, Lucille's mistake, as she once called her after too many vodkas at some family wedding where she kept touching her pearls like a rosary and pretending everyone wanted her opinion. Lucille shipped Nora off to boarding school in Vermont when she was 13. Told everyone it was a generous opportunity. What she meant was, out of sight, out of scandal. My wife never mentioned her. Not once during our marriage. I found out about Nora the first year we were married, at a barbecue when Harold, God rest his codependent soul, got a little tipsy and let it slip. Well, at least Emily turned out normal. Nora's still off in those Coltwoods somewhere, right? Lucille went pale. My wife kicked a shin under the table and changed the subject. I stored the name. Didn't ask. Didn't push. But I remembered. And when the storm started brewing, I went looking. Turns out, Nora wasn't off in the woods. She was a data analyst for a nonprofit that audits financial abuse in family court cases. She also ran a private blog under a pseudonym, a brutal, scalpel-sharp chronicle of growing up with a narcissist mother and a golden child sister who learned early that lies make better jewelry than pearls. I reached out through the blog's secure contact form. One sentence. Your sister's house of cards is falling. Would you like to help push? She responded within an hour. We met at a coffee shop halfway between where she lived and where Lucille pretended she was still welcome. She looked nothing like my wife. No polish, no pageantry. Hair in a bun, sweater from a thrift store. Eyes like a hawk that hadn't eaten in days. I've waited 20 years for this, she said. What do you need? I need her off the board. Permanently. No comebacks, no rebrands. I need her irrelevant. She smiled. I already started. Turns out Nora had been quietly compiling data on Lucille's shell companies for years. She suspected financial fraud, inheritance manipulation, maybe even tax evasion. But she never had access. Just theory. Until I gave her Clark. Clark got her everything. Routing numbers, flagged deposits, encrypted ledgers that Lucille thought were safe behind a VPN she paid a cousin's son to install. They weren't. And here's the twist. Nora didn't want revenge. She wanted proof. Proof that her mother, their mother, wasn't some misunderstood matriarch. Proof that her childhood was a lie. That the guilt, the gaslighting, the erasure had been real. So I gave her the rabbit. Told her where the false bottom was. What was inside? The audio, the files, the metadata. She cried when she held it. Not out of sadness, out of rage finally finding oxygen. And then she did what I never could. She went public. Wrote an open letter on her blog, detailing the entire web, Lucille's financial manipulations, my wife's entanglements, Griffin and Martin and the fraudulent LLCs, the offshore accounts, The inheritance redirection. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Anyone with half a brain could connect the dots. The post went viral in 48 hours. Reddit found it. Then LinkedIn. Then a few mid-tier podcasts that loved family drama with a legal edge. One lawyer did a whole YouTube breakdown on the tax fraud angle. And buried in the comments of one repost, someone wrote, "Wait, isn't this the same Emily R., who got booted from that brand firm last month?" The replies? Lethal. Screenshots. Photos. The Cabo image. A link to the ethics board investigation. A quote from the court deposition. People love a good downfall, especially when the villain wore pearl earrings and posted #gratitude selfies. By Monday, her name was trending in niche circles like wildfire trapped in a wine cellar. And on Tuesday, I received a letter. Not from her. From Nora. Inside was a single photograph. 2 little girls. One with a gap-toothed smile. One scowling at the camera like it owed her money. On the back, Nora had written, "She always hated being second, but she was never first. Just louder." Below it, a sticky note with one word. Done. That night, my wife tried calling again. Blocked number. For attempts. Then a voicemail. "Please. Everyone's turning on me. I didn't know about half of it. I swear. I just wanted something for myself. You took everything." "No, sweetheart. I returned everything. To Nora. To Amanda. To the truth. You took." I corrected. And yet, I wasn't smiling. Because part of me still remembered who she used to be. The girl who cried watching dog rescue videos. Who made up dumb songs when we painted the bedroom. Who once whispered, "Don't let me become her." But I did. I let it happen. Until I couldn't anymore. And now? Now, the last piece was in place. Because the house she still lived in, our marital home, she was about to learn she never actually owned it. The deed had always been in my name. That was Lucille's idea, ironically. Back when we bought the house, she insisted my wife not be on the title. "It's safer that way, dear," she'd said over champagne, "in case things go sideways." My wife had agreed at the time, probably thinking she'd wear me down later. But she never did. Because back then, I was still the man who said yes to everything to keep the peace. Until I didn't. Fast forward to now. After all the subpoenas, the depositions, the IRS audits, the ethics reviews, she still clung to one thing like a life raft, that house. The last thing with her name on the mailbox. The porch swing I installed. The fireplace we never lit after our second anniversary. That dining room where she cried after Lucille said her hair was too flat for photographs. It was her stage. She thought it was her anchor. But it was mine. Legally. Quietly. Permanently. And it was time to take it back. I waited until she was out. How did I know when? Clark, of course. The old Nest system still pinged me every time she disarmed it with the code she never changed, our anniversary date. The irony nearly made me laugh. She'd gone to a meeting with some bottom-rung PR agency still willing to hear her pitch. Desperate for re-entry into the world she'd been exiled from. That's when I arrived. Amanda was already there. So was the locksmith. I changed every lock, code, remote, and app login in under an hour. Not illegally, remember. My name was on the deed. I had a legal eviction notice, filed quietly 2 weeks prior and scheduled for this exact afternoon. Inside the house, I didn't pack a single thing that was hers. But I did leave a note. In the master bedroom. Right on her vanity. "The home you built on lies now belongs to silence. Kindly remove yourself from the premises. The man you underestimated." Attached was a copy of the court order. And a key. Not to the front door. To a storage unit. Where I'd boxed up everything she might argue for. Clothes. Photos. Books. That damn silver rabbit. She'd find it all there. Nothing broken. Nothing damaged. Just out. Out of my life. Out of my name. Out of excuses. I was halfway back to my truck when her car screeched into the driveway. Slammed to a stop. She got out, wild-eyed, windblown, cheeks flushed like someone had been crying on the freeway. "You can't do this," she said. "You can't." I didn't respond. Just handed her the eviction paperwork. She didn't even look at it. "You think this is a win?" she hissed. "You ruined me." "No," I said. "You ruined yourself." I just turned the lights on. Then she said the thing I'd been waiting for. The final card. Her last gasp. I'll tell them about the money, she said. About the crypto. You think you're untouchable? I smiled. Just a little. That's not a threat, I said. That's a confession. Her face twisted. You set me up. No, I said. You gave me everything I needed. I just saved the receipts. She stood there shaking while I backed out of the driveway, the wheels crunching over that stupid decorative gravel she'd insisted on because grass is too needy. Clark sent me the footage later. Her pounding on the front door long after I'd gone. Screaming. Pleading. Then sitting on the steps. Head in her hands. Defeated. That video would never be published. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about finality. And it was nearly complete. There was only one piece left. One final, buried truth I hadn't spoken aloud since the beginning. The thing that made me start keeping the rabbit. The thing that made me watch her so closely. Because this didn't begin with Griffin, or Martin, or Lucille. It began with a hospital room, a test result, and a question she never wanted me to ask. The hospital room smelled like bleach and plastic hope. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a steady, sterile reminder that life could turn on a dime, and usually did when you were least prepared. She was asleep in the chair beside the bed, arms folded, pretending she cared. The nurse had stepped out. I was alone with the paperwork. Blood work. The nurse left it in the tray by accident. Wrong chart. Wrong name on the tab. But right name on the patient. Me. I wasn't sick. That wasn't the shock. The shock was the note scrawled in the margin. Confirmed. Azoospermia. Patient produces no viable sperm. It hit like a slap I didn't know I'd been bracing for. I reread it. Then again. I was 34. Healthy. We'd been trying for 2 years. My wife had cried over wine, wailed about her barren womb, blamed stress, blamed fate, blamed timing. Turns out fate wasn't the problem. I was. And she knew. She had to know. She was the one who pushed for the test. Told me it would put my mind at ease. But I never got the results. She told me they were normal, that I was fine, that we just had to be patient. She said all that while knowing the truth. I could never have children. 3 months later, she was pregnant. She cried when she told me. It's a miracle, she whispered. It finally happened. We did it. And I believed her. Because I wanted to. I wanted it so badly, I buried the note deep in my toolbox under a stack of dull drill bits and a rusted socket wrench. I told myself I must have misread it. Or the chart was old. Or the nurse made a mistake. But now, after Griffin, after Martin, after the lies and the fake accounts and the staged withdrawals, I knew the truth. That child was never mine. I had spent 5 years raising a lie. I remember the first time he called me Dad, his little hand gripping mine in the parking lot. I remember teaching him how to ride a bike, how to throw a spiral. I remember putting up shelves for his stuffed animals and painting his name on the bedroom wall. But it wasn't my name. Not really. When I confronted her months before all this began, she cried. Of course she cried. Swore she didn't know. Swore it was a blur. That we were distant, and it only happened once. That she did it for us. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked into the garage, opened the toolbox, pulled out the test result, and laid it on the table. She said nothing after that. She didn't need to. The silence told me everything. That was the moment the clock started ticking. The moment I began recording, collecting, building the file. It wasn't revenge. It was justice with blueprints. I didn't take it to court. I didn't tell the boy. He deserved better than to be collateral damage in his mother's war. I just disappeared. Slowly, quietly, with precision, until she slammed the door and told me she was better off without me. And now she was. No job, no name, no house, no narrative to manipulate, no loyal mother, no lovers, no legacy. I gave her everything she wanted. And then I took it back, piece by piece, gracefully, deliberately, because when she erased me from her truth, she forgot one thing. I don't vanish. I record, and I wait. In the final box I left at the storage unit, buried under a photo album and some tarnished costume jewelry, there was one last envelope. It wasn't legal. It wasn't threatening. It was handwritten, in plain ink. And it said, "One day, he'll ask why I left. Tell him it's because I loved him too much to let him grow up thinking deception is normal. Tell him the man who raised him never lied to him, only to himself." I never signed it. Didn't have to, because I was already gone, and the only thing left behind was the echo of the door she slammed shut on a man she thought was disposable. But some doors, once closed, never open again.